All right, we're going to start with Phil in California. Hello.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yeah. Sorry to put you on the spot of following up on that story, but what's on your mind?
Totally fine. I just want to say first, I'm really glad you told that story. That's very kind of selfless to be able to tell that story in this situation. And I really like the point that you brought up about making sure that we got this from a real perspective, and it's not just news to us, because I think that's really, really important, especially right now in this time in the country. But so thanks for saying that.
I appreciate that.
And especially after that, my really esoteric question just seems completely pointless. But
well, what are we about if not esoteric, pointless questions?
Yeah, you're definitely right about that. So my question.
Sorry, sometimes I use humor at inappropriate times, but go ahead.
So I was actually, I kind of called in on a whim today just because an hour ago, I was just watching the most recent Atheist Experience upload, and part of the discussion came to the fine-tuning discussion. And the one thing that I always wonder about this, because I'm not very versed in any kind of philosophy or any kind of like academic type of logic, or if you could say, I don't know if that even makes sense, but like, whenever people get into the fine-tuning type of stuff, I always get really annoyed by one point. And before I'll say that, I just want to say it's not just religious people that say this. In like reading about science or other things like that, it seems like a lot of different people, even unrelated to religion, talk about the fine-tuning type of concepts and like the universe being so perfectly fine-tuned and everything like that. Like it seems pretty common for physicists to talk about this just from a physics point of view also. So what I've always kind of like a little bit annoyed by, and what I'm wondering if there's a reason for this, is that it seems to me like when you're going to talk about fine-tuning, it seems to me like the conversation is so redundant because of this point. Like if the universe it wasn't fine-tuned, or at least if the universe wasn't formulated in a way to be able to sustain life, we wouldn't be here to ask the question. So, and I know that seems like kind of naively, like almost absurd to say that, but it's really that simple, it seems like to me. It seems like, even if the universe is perfectly fine-tuned, like unbelievably fine-tuned, where there's a trillion, billion other universes out there that don't have life in them because it's impossible in those, what is that? That doesn't mean anything, right? I mean, we're here because we can be here, and that's why we're able to ask the question. So basically my question is there any kind of logical or like philosophical nuances that make this interesting that I'm not aware of? Like, is there any kind of, I guess that's pretty much it. Hopefully that makes sense.
I think the answer to the question is mainly that people in general are bad at statistics and are bad at perspective. And when they see something that is surprising and beneficial to them that they don't fully understand, then they want to look for a reason for it. And part of that is that people are basically wired by their biology to want to look for reasons for things, because when you're dealing with other people or wild animals, thinking in terms of some other thing's perspective and trying to figure out what it wants and how it's going to act is a survival instinct. And so when it comes to something big and unexplained, people also see, there's all these fortunate circumstances that led to me sitting here staring into my coffee and thinking about where the universe came from. And so how did that all happen? And then the part of your brain that predicts whether a guy is about to come at you with a stone axe activates and says, some guy must have wanted me to be here, because that's the way things work in the universe I'm familiar with. I mean, that's kind of a general answer to your question about why do people find this convincing, which I think was your question.
Yeah, I think I could definitely see that reinforcing someone's, like, especially if they already have a religious belief or an ideology that's there, that, you know, if somebody approaches them and say, you know, it's so improbable that you're here, and, you know, it's improbable that, you know, this physics works this way and this works that way, and, you know, all this had to come together in order for you to be here. I can see how that would reinforce someone's belief that they had. Whenever I heard this argument before, it was always interesting to me because I looked at it, I guess, from the opposite perspective of, rather than saying, the universe was so finely tuned for us, it's more along the lines of, you know, our survival. We were basically fine-tuned to the universe, like the universe itself, like whatever it came from, we developed inside of it. You know, the rules that were there, all the interactions, the physical interactions, the chemical interactions, all that portions that were there, we are, the effect of that portion. And so I don't see it being, this cosmic thing that, the universe was made exactly so that we can be here. If the universe was different, then the universe would be different. Whether we would be here or not, I don't know. But all I know is I'm an emergent product of this universe and the parameters that it has. And, the fine-tuning argument, it never really was convincing to me.
Yeah. There's also another thing that occurs to me, which is that people are basically culturally brought up to think of things in terms of dramatic stories. There have been lots of stories for thousands of years. I mean, there's this almost cliche concept of the hero's journey, which some big shot author wrote about once. I think it was the Heart of Darkness guy. Oh, now I'm losing nerd cred again. But like, the story of Star Wars, for instance, where Luke, but this can be mapped onto really old stuff like the Iliad and the Odyssey, and somebody is living at home and contented, and then some big event happens to shake up their life, and they go through all these trials and overcome adversity and defeat the big bad guy at the end. Mm-hmm. And that narrative structure is really satisfying to us, and we tend to frame our real lives in terms of that. And I'm reminded of a webcomic I saw. It was probably Saturday Morning Breakfast Cereal one time, where this young boy is saying to his father, well, I'm tired of living in this little village. I'm going to go out and find my destiny. And the dad says, most people who find their destiny just go out and get murdered by wolves because fairy tales aren't real. And then he goes out and he gets murdered by wolves. And he's like, oh, well, this sucks. But you don't hear about those stories because they're boring. And so there's a survivor bias, which says that the people who survived and thrived weren't just lucky ever. They were the hero of their own story. And I think that's what the fine-tuning argument is.
And that was Joseph Conrad, the author of
Heart of Darkness, right?
Yes.
Got it. Nailed that one.
Yeah, that makes sense. I think Matt likes to make this point a lot, that if you're playing bridge, for example, and you deal all the cards and everything comes up perfectly and you get the perfect set of hands, that's actually exactly as likely as getting a completely chaotic, meaningless hand. And we like to statistically, we like to pretend like that's a lot more meaningful than it is. So
well,
that's cool.
Yes and no, because the odds of a fantastic, unique bridge hand are the same as a very specific, unique, chaotic hand. But also, there are a lot more chaotic hands. There are a lot more ways you could organize the cards to make a meaningless hand. So it is still surprising and interesting when one comes up, but if you deal yourself 1,000,000 hands of bridge and then 1 in a million comes up as an amazing 1 in a million hand, you should expect that from time to time. Or like if it's a 1 in 1,000 hand, then it's going to come up 1,000 times, right? And people often don't run the odds or don't know how to run the odds, and they also don't consider how many different kinds of hands would have been very good hands.
Yeah, I think it also comes to, I guess, our people kind of focusing on ourselves, because it usually focuses on the human species for life, that fine-tuning for life, but a lot of it, boils down to us, like looking at our lives here. But I mean, there's so much that can go wrong and so much that can kill us in any instant. Like there's so much that's the universe has to offer. Like it's the enormity of that I wish I could be alive for so much longer while we explore this thing and our technology grows. But we're such a tiny blip on this huge radar of what you would call the universe. It's to say that we're so that, it was fine-tuned specifically for this small particular portion to manifest and to grow seems a bit absurd, considering the sheer scale of everything else that exists in the universe that we actually know of at this point.
Yeah, but it's absurd in a way, but people want to feel important, and it's disconcerting.
And that's what I was saying before. Yeah,
it's uncomfortable for people to think maybe I don't have this amazing story arc, and I'm not the one who beats Darth Vader. I'm not the guy. I just watched a YouTube video last night, desperately scrambling for more nerd cred. It was about the Laserdisc game Dragon's Lair. And in this story, like the animator, Don Bluth, got all the credit, but the guy who actually came up with the system and dreamed up the concept of the game and hired Don Bluth and basically did the whole thing, not only was glossed over and got almost none of the credit, but he also sunk thousands of dollars of his own money, basically his life savings, into a company that he thought would do more of this. And that just went nowhere, and he's still relatively obscure. And that's kind of sad, but that happens to a lot of people, and that sucks.
Just to I don't want to get into another long. I don't want to take up any more time, but I just
we'll be quick on the last bit.
Okay.
Yeah.
I just want to put this out there for everyone who's interested in the concept. At least, I think since we're already kind of in the subject, I think that I feel like culture is kind of sort of going in the direction of being interested in less relevant stories, if that makes sense. I think that culture is kind of feels like entertainment is slowly getting more and more. Definitely not on a grand scale. Popular culture is always, popular TV shows and things like that are always going to be very kind of simplified. But I feel like in general, more and more people are kind of interested in things like that. And it would be very interesting to see that shift more in that direction. So for anyone interested in, or anyone who's creative out there, I think that's an interesting thing to try to work towards. But yeah. Thanks for all the thoughts. That's very interesting, everything you guys said.
Okay. Well, thanks for calling. Bye.